The only way Italy could have been destroyed in World War I was if Austria-Hungary was much stronger, and understanding the Austrian view of Italy is crucial, so I'll briefly explain why the Habsburgs held them with such contempt. These are not my personal opinions. Everything had been going great on the Italian peninsula, with a beautiful assortment of vibrant cultures, languages, and peoples. It was the birthplace of the Renaissance, for crying out loud. Then, Napoleon showed up in the early 1800s with this crazy idea that Italy should be one unified kingdom. Thankfully, the diminutive Corsican was crushed, and order was restored. The foreign minister of the Austrian Empire, Clemens von Metternich, put it best. The word Italy is a geographical expression, a description which is useful shorthand, but has none of the political significance the efforts of the revolutionary ideologues try to put on it, and which is full of dangers for the very existence of the states which make up the peninsula. In 1848, some crazy radicals popped up all over Europe with these insane ideas like equality under the law and self-rule, absolutely incompatible with the Habsburgs. Think about it. All the good parts of Italy were all thanks to the Habsburgs anyway. Tuscany, Modena, Lombardy, and Venetia were all extremely wealthy due to Habsburg industrialization. When the Italians were left on their own devices, it didn't go very well. Southern Italy, uncorrupted by foreign influences, was a cesspool backwater ruled by crime mafias. Which was better? You already know it was Austria, duh. On top of that, the papacy and the entire Catholic Church, the very one founded by Jesus Christ, was protected by the glorious Habsburg dynasty. Thanks to the revolutionaries, the Risorgimento, the Italian Wars of Unification, kicked off. The Savoyard bastards used the fictitious idea of Italy to steal the peninsula from Austria, and more importantly, from God. They broke numerous peace agreements like the Treaty of Zurich, and were even promised the rest of Venetia from Austria, but just had to puff their chest out and go to war for their honor. This caused Austria to lose the Brothers' War to Prussia in 1866, so the scummy Lutheran Prussians pushed the Habsburgs, the leaders of the German world since Emperor Frederick III back in 1452, out of Germany. The Italians got Venetia, but it still wasn't enough, so 4 years later, shocking absolutely nobody, the treacherous Italians backstabbed the French, who were the only reason Austria didn't crush them in the first place, and invaded the remains of the Papal States in 1870 during the Franco-Prussian War. With no protection, the Italian horde swarmed the Holy See, then held some Putin-esque referendums, which were definitely legitimate as the Italian military oversaw them to ensure fairness. According to the Italian army, the lands first granted to the papacy with the donation of Pepin back in 754 gave up their rich history and independence. Sure, buddy.
I love democracy.
Now with full control of Italy, they set about ruining the Italian peninsula, imposing an artificial culture in the Tuscan language, classifying everything else as regional dialects, and destroying over a millennium of cultures. More lies from Savoy. The new kingdom was so horrible to live in, millions of Italians moved halfway across the world to escape. Italy was somehow taken aback when France rightfully seized Tunisia in 1881, which the whiny Italians labeled as the slap of Tunis. So, King Umberto helped form the Triple Alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary, but he was later assassinated by some radical irredentist anarchist. His lying, weak, backstabber son, Victor Emmanuel III, took the throne and even renewed the Triple Alliance in 1912, but then when Franz Ferdinand was assassinated as Serbia attacked Austria-Hungary and Italy owed the Habsburgs their support, the outrageous Italians' word of honor meant nothing. Shocker. They initially were neutral and demanded ridiculous concessions from either side to join the war, before the Entente offered them the Treaty of London, and the imperialist Italians had no qualms stealing Slavic land in Dalmatia. During the actual war, Italy was hilariously bad, with special generals like Luigi Cadorna, who failed at the Isonzo 12 times, so decided to execute many of his own men for cowardice. They were eventually bailed out by France and Britain, but as a result, received little of the promised lands, giving rise to the Vittoria Mutilata, the mutilated victory, as they felt cheated by their allies, giving rise to a new extremist dictator, Il Duce. But fear no more, you 50,000 loyal Habsburgers and the 90% of dangerous Italians who have yet to subscribe. As stated earlier, the only way for the Italian peninsula to be fixed during World War I was for the Habsburg Empire to be strong enough to save it from Italy. So, when Austria-Hungary had their disastrous Bosnia expedition in 1878, they went on a series of massive reforms to catch up to speed with Germany and France, transforming themselves into an equally strong power by the time of the Great War. To further solidify their base, the empire added the Third Crown of Croatia in the south, renewing itself into Austria-Hungary Croatia. When the Great War broke out, they made light work of the pesky Serbians, and together with Germany, knocked Russia out of the war. With their eastern borders secured, they turned their full attention towards Italy in mid-1916, who refused Habsburg peace attempts after Britain bribed them to continue fighting. You can watch all that in more detail in the first video of the series. But now, Welcome to the world of Doppeladler. It must be noted that the war was not popular in Italy, as Manfred Rockensteiner wrote in the First World War and the End of the Habsburg Monarchy. Quote, "The south of the country and the rural regions were against the war. The north and the cities were in favor of it. Piedmont and Lombardy broke ranks to the extent that they were also predominantly against the war. Brescia voted in favor of the war. The bulk of Veneto, on the other hand, was in favor of retaining neutrality. Italy was facing the acid test. The royal house was cursed and the king was subjected to death threats. A resident of Milan wrote to the king that dying for Trient was not worthwhile." With the general population already split over joining the war, once Austria redirected its entire military towards the Alps, many had enough. Communists, socialists, and anarchists who had been kept relatively in check up until that point went on a massive series of strikes, hoping to force their government's hand, but to no avail. Victor Emmanuel III sent in the army to deal with them, only exacerbating the situation. Austria, under the command of Franz Conrad von Hotzendorf, who was considered by contemporaries to be one of the best generals of the entire war, which may or may not have been justified, always held deep enmity against Italy. This was common within the imperial government, who often lambasted the Italians as perfidious, according to The Undermining of Austria-Hungary, The Battle for Hearts and Minds by Mark Cornwall. Conrad had been warning Vienna for years about the Italians, and wanted to launch a preemptive war against them long before 1914, so was quite pleased with his opportunity to right the wrongs of the Risorgimento. To be clear, the situation was too different from our history to know what the aims for Austria would be, but Conrad's historical aims serve as a starting point, which Holger Herwig laid out in the First World War, Germany and Austria-Hungary, 1914 to 1918. Quote, "In the south, Conrad argued that the border with Italy must be redrawn along the lines of 1866. Tyrol had to be moved south to the Piave and Tagliamento rivers, while elsewhere, the monarchy needed to move its frontier stakes to the line of the Po Mincio south of Lake Garda." According to Rockensteiner, Conrad demanded that Italy, be returned to its pre-1866 borders. With that in mind, it's logical to deduce that the aims for Vienna would be far grander, with an opportunity presented to fully liberate Italy from the Savoyard rule, restoring the natural order on the peninsula. With the full might of the Habsburg Imperium, Italia delenda est.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Back in February, the imperial heir, Archduke Karl, had been given command of the elite 20th Army Corps to, quote, "equip the heir to the throne, at least outwardly, with the qualities of a tried and tested military leader." Although serving under a Conrad, Karl wished to prove himself on the field, so supported Conrad's aim to quickly end the war by outflanking the Italians. Francesco L. Galassi and Mark Harrison's work, Italy at War 1915 to 1918, summed it up. Quote, "The border between Italy and Austria, from Switzerland to the Adriatic Sea, 600 kilometers long, was shaped like an S on its back. The mountains above the S were Austrian, and the plain below the S was Italian. Thus, if the Austrians could break through the Italian lines at their southernmost point, they could envelop the entire Italian army and the upward pointing portion of the S. And, since Italy's main industrial center, Milan, was just over 120 kilometers away from the front, the Austrian High Command hoped to quickly knock Italy out of the war. In the spring of 1916, the Austrian General Staff launched a massive offensive on the southernmost curve of the front, trying to punch through the Italian lines and drive east to the sea, trapping the Italian army against the Austrian-held mountains. At the same time, Cadorna repeatedly failed to breach the Sonza River, despite the involvement of 2/3 of the Italian army being active in just that theater.
Italy.
I have the high ground. You underestimate my power. Don't try it.
After that strategy failed 10 million times, the foolish Italians didn't know what hit them, as Austria, now with their full army, rapidly pushed to the Adriatic from South Tyrol. Italy was screwed. Just like that, 2/3 of Italy's army was wiped out. Austria expected Italy to sue for peace, but more foreign bribes kept them in the war, so Austria made light work, pushing up to the Mincio River.
I didn't hear no bell.
With Italy still refusing to accept defeat, the Habsburgs flooded Italians with propaganda, calling for the war's end. Italians, with the greatest and seemingly most justified hopes, we marched off 16 months ago to secure a massive long-range goals against Austria-Hungary. In multiple Isonzo battles and numerous Alpine engagements, you have bloodily come to blows without even being able to achieve your short-term goals. The Austro-Hungaro-Croatian troops have now broken through your lines. They fight not against the Italian people, they fight against your perfidious government, which seeks to wrest from the monarchy territory that has belonged to Austria-Hungary-Croatia for centuries. The monarchy must defend itself against this attack. We want our territory to remain intact. On this basis, we are always ready to conclude peace. You could have this peace tomorrow. We are also ready to supply you with coal and grain, of which we have quite enough. Thus, your plight would come to an end. Your government alone is responsible for this tragic war in your country and all its consequences, the losses, the lack of everything. They are preventing peace because they will not give up their mad plans for conquest. This is slightly altered from the historical 1917 Czerzen propaganda leaflet. By this point, the people were fed up with war, so a new wave of anarchists and communists broke out into open revolts, with the largest groups in the Po Valley, where the Socialist Party was strongest. These attacks were not directed solely at the government, as the Socialists started burning down churches, attacking priests, beheading nuns, and worse, just as the Communists historically did in Spain. The Savoyards were still preoccupied with the war, so didn't redirect many troops to quell the destruction, forcing Pope Benedict XV, who had tried to keep Italy out of the war in the first place and had kept good communication with Vienna, to reach out to the Habsburgs to save his flock, privately promising them unofficial church support. In November, Emperor Franz Joseph passed away, so the young Karl took the thrones of Austria-Hungary and Croatia, and was now ready to make his mark. Karl historically was not opposed to the Austro-Polish solution, now off the table as Poland and Ukraine were both ruled by Habsburgs, but saw his chance to cement his presence in Italy. His wife, Empress Zita, was a member of the House of Bourbon-Parma, who had claims over much of Italy, and Karl was close friends with their brothers. So many around the young emperor, his wife, his family, his friends, and more importantly, the imperial army who were destroying their enemies, pushed him to right the wrongs of 1848. Most important of all, though, was his extremely popular foreign minister, Count Czernin, wanted to punish the enemies of the Imperium.
There must be war. God wills it!
Austria seized the papal plea as justification to push deeper into Italy, quickly marching through the fatigued Italian army who had little will to fight. The socialists in the Po were systematically wiped out, and the church soon painted the Austrians as loyal servants of Christ to their parishioners, while anti-Savoy sentiments swelled. Now controlling Italy's industrial triangle of Milan, Turin, and Genoa, the Italian war capability was crippled. Back in Rome, an anarchist bombing killed Victor Emmanuel III, so his young son Umberto II hastily offered peace terms to the Habsburgs, but by this point it was too late. They were already well into Emilia-Romagna and found little active resistance from locals, just as Cornwall historically noted in the occupied portions of Venetia. A similar attempt was made on Benedict XV's life, but thankfully the Holy Father was unharmed, though the attack had profound implications for Italy. Karl, who up until that point was still unsure what direction to take on the peninsula, felt called by God to destroy the fictitious Kingdom of Italy and restore the Pope to his natural position. New waves of Austrian propaganda flooded the Catholic people of Italy, repudiating the anti-clerical regime of Savoy, who had kept the Pope a prisoner in the Vatican after all, now claiming to be fighting in support of the papacy. Thus, the Habsburgs continued further south, to Germany's annoyance.
Oh, I have a bad feeling about this.
Austria had promised them to quickly knock Italy out before redeploying to the Western Front so they could together defeat the French. However, this looked more like a war of conquest at this point. The resurgent Habsburg Empire, with no competition to check them in the south, could make them forget that Germany was the reason for the Habsburgs' success, and become very unreliable partners. Secret fears swept across Berlin when it became apparent Italian days were numbered, but none would dare speak the question. Would Austria one day look north at Silesia? With the Habsburg armies closing in on Rome, the Savoyards and the Romanian loyalists within the government and army fled south to Sicily, fearing the worst. Shortly after, the Austrian troops arrived in Rome to much fanfare among the older crowd, who remembered the good old days of papal rule. Some Italians had the audacity to claim that people were forced to cheer for their Habsburg liberators. How ridiculous. Within a few months, the Habsburg military was at the Straits of Messina, but found their path blocked by the Italian, French, and British navies. Britain had no qualms with the peninsula returning to its natural order. As Rochensteiner explained, the two had no direct conflict. However, the island of Malta was invaluable to the British Mediterranean fleet, and an aggressive Habsburg-backed power in Sicily could pose an issue, so they preferred to keep Italy alive, albeit as a shadow of its former self, with only Sardinia and Sicily. Thus, Austria was forced to quickly reach an informal agreement with Vice Admiral Somerset Kauf-Kaltrup, the head of Britain's Mediterranean fleet, to end hostilities. Britain, Austria, and Italy couldn't formally reach anything, as Umberto refused to drop his claims to the entire peninsula, and Austria was preparing to move over to the Western Front, where they would directly clash with British troops. With the entire peninsula liberated from their Savoyard oppressors,
Oh, I wouldn't say free. More like under new management.
well, it was overseen by Habsburg occupation. So Karl quickly dismantled Italy in a repeat of Pepin's actions, known as the Donation of Karl, promising Benedict a restoration of the Papal States. Italy was completely reorganized with the Treaty of Rome, now fully freed by the Habsburgs. Lombardy Venetia was annexed by Austria despite Karl's personal objections, as Count Czernin fulfilled the more punitive desires of the Austrian populace by retaking their historic lands. This mirrored the historical development Robert F. Hopwood wrote in The Conflict Between Count Czernin and Emperor Charles in 1918. the Duchy of Parma, the hereditary lands of his wife's family, were restored and greatly expanded to annex all of Piedmont and Savoy, under the leadership of Elias I. He fought for the Habsburg army during the war and was a half-brother of Zita, so this shored up a strong buffer against France for Austria. Beneath Parma, the Duchy of Modena was technically restored, which was supposed to fall to Karl's second son, Robert, Archduke of Austria-Est, restoring Modena as a secondature. However, the young Archduke was only 1 at the time, so it was centrally administered from Vienna until Robert was of age, as Charles still had the legitimate right to the duchy. The Archduchy of Tuscany was likewise restored under Habsburg rule, to Archduke Joseph Ferdinand, the son of the last Archduke of Tuscany, Ferdinand IV. Joseph Ferdinand was a major player in the Italian campaign, serving as a colonel general, the second highest rank of command, and was extremely close to the emperor, so it was a well-deserved prize. Most important of all for Charles, though, was the total restoration of the Papal States to Pope Benedict. The remaining south of Italy, half of the old Kingdom of Two Sicilies, was restored under Alfonso, Count of Caserta. He was the son of the last King of Two Sicilies, Francis II, and the daughter of Maria Theresa of Austria, not that Maria Theresa of Austria, so had strong ties with Vienna. However, Alfonso didn't take the title of King of Naples, as this was far less prestigious, so maintained his claim as the King of Two Sicilies, meaning the Kingdom of Two Sicilies had 0 Sicilies.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
European politics and dynastic succession just makes so much sense. Sicily ceded the Habsburg navy a military port at Otranto, just as Albania did with Flore, shoring up the Adriatic as a Habsburg lake. Rhodes, seized by the Austrian and Ottoman navies during the war, was restored to the Knights Hospitaller. The Pope lavishly repaid his savior Karl with many gifts, restoring the power of jus exclusivae as something solely for the Austrian monarchy, granting him the right to veto any candidates to the papacy. This was something held by many Catholic monarchs until Pope Pius X forbade it in his 1904 Commissum Nobis after Franz Joseph tried to block another cardinal's election. Additionally, the title Patricius Romanus, Patrician of Rome, the same title Pope Adrian I conferred on Pepin and his son Charlemagne, giving them the duty to protect the Catholic Church from any temporal threats, was bestowed on Karl, establishing an even stronger link between the papacy and Austria. Privately, Benedict pressured Karl to push uniatism on all Orthodox citizens across any Habsburg realm, primarily in the Balkans, Moldova, and eastern Poland and Ukraine. To further Karl's authority, multiple Habsburgs from the past were canonized as saints, like Archduchess Magdalena of Austria, making him seem closer to God without directly stating it, strengthening royal prestige across the entire Catholic world. The culmination of what became known as the Benedictine canonizations was Charlemagne, who was already viewed as a saint across Germany, Belgium, and France, so with the Habsburg claim as the spiritual successors of the Carolingians, this solidified Karl as a new Charlemagne.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for!
With Italy now firmly under the Habsburg heel, Austria began shifting its attention on the sole remaining major Entente power of the continent, France. A new front in Provence could prove decisive, enabling the Germans to finally take Paris and end this godforsaken war. Make sure to come back for future videos to see the fates of France, Britain, and the rest of the globe in the world of Doppeladler. I'm currently working to turn this into a Hearthfire and 4 mod like Kaiserreich, so if you want to help, join my Discord server. Special thanks to John Not Real Name and Leonidas for helping me with the video. This wouldn't be possible without your help. If you want to turn your ideas into videos just like this, join my Discord server. I'm always looking for help. Anyways, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. You can watch another great one here. See ya.